Hello Magic Makers, welcome to Storytime with Mombierella. This is a young adult fiction and may be inappropriate for some younger viewers. Evil Thing. A Tale of That DeVille Woman by Serena Valentino. Copyright Disney Enterprises Incorporated, 2020. Chapter 2, Part 2. The Last DeVille. My mother decided to travel the world after the reading of my father's will, and I didn't blame her. She was heartbroken. My father's death was so unexpected. For my mother, one day he was with us, and the next he was gone. She wasn't even able to say goodbye. By the time she was done berating me for all the hateful lies the nurse had told her, my father had quickly slipped away from us. My mother was in shock, and so was I. It was strange living in a world without Papa. I missed him. I missed his nightly visits and our talks, and I missed his laugh most of all. And his smile. Oh, how I missed his mischievous smile. I must have sat at my vanity for an hour, trying to decide if I wanted to wear the jade earrings Papa gave me to his funeral. I imagined it would make him smile to see me wearing them. But when I put them on, the oddest feeling came over me. It was probably all in my mind, but they made me feel so odd, so unlike myself. And I was already feeling out of sorts, trying to get used to living in this new world without Papa. In the end, I decided not to wear them. Our solicitor came by the evening after the funeral to read Papa's will. He was a funny little man, Sir Huntley. He had a round face and small round spectacles, and his jowls jiggled when he spoke. We sat in the morning room, silently watching him go through his papers, until he finally arrived at the papers he was looking for. He cleared his throat and began reading. I, Lord DeVille, being of sound mind and body. My mother cut Sir Huntley off. Please, Sir Huntley, if you don't mind, just get on with it. Sir Huntley cleared his throat again, shuffling the papers a little more. Very well, Lady DeVille, if that's what you'd prefer. Your husband, Lord DeVille, has left the entirety of his fortune in trust to his daughter, which I am to be executor until her 25th birthday. The man looked like he might pop with nervousness, or perhaps he was fearing my mother might explode with anger. I could see by the look on his face he was expecting some sort of tantrum, some sort of theatrics, but my mother was, at least for the moment, containing her outrage. She just sat there looking at him silently. I don't know if she was in shock or disbelief. Lady DeVille, did you hear me? And then it happened. The explosion he'd clearly been bracing himself for. Of course I heard you. And what am I to do? What am I expected to do? How am I supposed to live? Can you tell me that? My mother had startled the man so violently it made his jowls quiver again. But he bravely continued. Lord DeVille has made provisions for you. In his will, you will be given a lifetime yearly allowance. And the house, its possessions? She demanded. She stood up swiftly and dramatically, causing the poor solicitor to shrink back in his chair, like a frightened, beady-eyed mole. Those two have been left to Miss Cruella, and cannot be touched, along with the capital, he said, his hands shaking. She threw her glass, sending it crashing to the floor. Sir Huntley looked scandalized. I swear, if he'd been able, he would have sunken into his chair and disappeared. If that is all, she said dismissively, you may leave now, Sir Huntley. Mamma was angry, angrier than I'd ever seen her. But the funny little man in the tweed suit didn't budge. He didn't take her cue to leave even when she stood up. I'm sorry, Lady DeVille, but I'm afraid there are conditions Miss Cruella needs to be made aware of before I leave, he said, looking rather uncomfortable at this unusual and unsightly show of emotion. Well then, as neither of you have need of me any longer, I will excuse myself, Mamma said, storming out of the room. And then I was alone, facing a man who looked more like a bulldog in a tweed suit than a solicitor, when all I wanted to do was chase after my poor Mamma. Sir Huntley shuffled his papers rather uncomfortably for a few more moments, before breaking the silence. I'm sure your mother is under tremendous stress, he said, trying to excuse her behavior. Your father wanted to be clear about the conditions of this will. He wants you to keep the DeVille name even after you marry. You're the last of the DeVille line, and since there's no male heir, It is up to you to keep the family name alive for future generations." I quickly agreed, eager to find my mamma and console her, eager to tell her I was on her side, eager to see if she had forgiven me for all the terrible things that the uppity nurse had said to her. But the bespectacled mole kept talking. "To be clear, Mr. Bill, should you marry and take your husband's name, the fortune will revert to your mother. I understand what keeping the family name means, Sir Huntley." The man narrowed his eyes at me. "Your father was concerned you wouldn't be properly taken care of, should the fortune revert to Lady Deville," he said, shuffling his papers nervously again. "I understand, Sir Huntley. I do. I don't plan to marry anyone, but if I do, for some reason, go mad and decide to marry, I promise to keep my father's name." The man cleared his throat again, clearly still nervous, indicating he had more to say. "You say this now, Miss Cruella, but there may be a day when you meet someone who changes your mind." Sir Huntley was right, but neither of us knew it yet. "It would take a remarkable man to change my mind, Sir Huntley. Someone who wanted the same things I want out of life. Someone willing to give me my independence, and be willing to take my father's name. Someone like my father. But I doubt I will ever meet such a man, and if I do, I assure you, sir, I will preserve my father's name. It's the least I can do for such a great man." Sir Huntley looked relieved, but still had no intention of letting me go after my mamma, to see if all was well between us. I desperately wanted to see her before she left for her trip. "He also left a message, Miss Cruella. It's rather personal, but I trust you will understand its meaning." He cleared his throat, continuing. "He said to find someone worthy of you. He said he would rather have someone treat you like a treasure than give you treasures. Someone who shows you his love with his words and his actions, not by buying you gifts." "Thank you, Sir Huntley. I believe I understand," I said. I stood to signal it was time for him to leave. Sir Huntley was a man who understood social cues, and his job was done, at least for that day. Sir Huntley and I said our goodbyes at the front door, and Jackson let him out. I was longing to go up and see my mother, but as I turned to make my way up the stairs, I met Anita coming down them. "Cruella, how are you? Let's go upstairs to your room. You must be exhausted. Would you like me to get you some tea?" Anita was always there for me. Always so sweet. "Thank you, Anita, but I want to check on my mamma." By the door, Jackson cleared his throat. "Miss Cruella," he said, "your mother has already left for her trip. I know she was sorry she couldn't say goodbye herself." I was confused, but to say so would show I didn't know what was going on in my own household. I didn't want to betray my composure, but I think Jackson read the look of surprise on my face. He knew the rules. He acted as though I knew of my mother's plans, even though I did not. "Her trip around the world, Miss Cruella. I'm sure she told you about it, and it simply slipped your mind, with the recent events. She said to let you know she would be back by the end of summer, in time to see you off to boarding school." "Yes, her trip, of course." My mind was reeling. She had been with me in the morning room just moments earlier. "But her things, how did she pack so quickly?" I asked. "Her trunks were already packed and waiting in the car," he said. "Already packed? She must have packed them as soon as Papa died. And she hadn't told me. She just left without saying goodbye." Anita took my hand gently in hers, and even though it felt like my world was falling apart, somehow, that gave me the strength to keep going. I remember saying something to the effect of, "I see. Very well, Jackson. Miss Anita and I will take our lunch in the dining room today." Or something of the like. I was the lady of the house, after all. That is at least until my mother returned home, and I needed to start acting like it.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this reading. If you haven't had a chance to, please take a second, like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, comment down below, share with a friend, and check out some of the other Villain series chapters and books as well. Join us next time, and remember, let it go and keep moving forward. Have a magical day. Bye.